Hey, what's up? Check, check, check. Let me see. Okay. This is DJL7. Let me turn up my volume a little bit. Check it out. Yeah. So the thing is that, as you know, I have my online activist interview series, and today I have a very special guest. His name is, well, actually, let him introduce himself. Go ahead.
Well, greetings. Appreciate the invite, DJL 7. My name is Greg Coleridge, and I'm the co-director of an outfit called Move to Amend. Move to Amend.org. It's the website. It is an organization that's been around since 2010, the very almost virtual moment of when the United States Supreme Court issued their famous or infamous decision that some of you may have heard of called Citizens United versus FEC. This was a case that expanded the power and ability of well-to-do individuals and corporate entities to hijack and capture and dominate and overrule our ability as self-governing people to self-govern. And so this organization has been around for almost 13 years now, and its purpose is to pass. I mean, there's a number of different things, but just to sort of give a little background of myself before we get into the organization, I've been with Move to Amend since 2017. Prior to that, I worked for about 3 decades with a Quaker-related organization, Quaker being sort of the nickname for what's called the Religious Society of Friends, a religious organization considered to be one of the 3 peace organizations, Brethren, Mennonites, and Quakers or Friends. And this was a Quaker-related organization called the American Friends Service Committee, which won in 1947 the Nobel Peace Prize for its post-World War II relief and reconstruction work. And in that capacity, I am from Northeast Ohio, and so led that organization. We worked on a variety of justice and peace and environmental projects. Where again, I worked for about 30 years working with a variety of different organizations and groups and constituencies, from student, labor, religious, ethical persuasion, like humanists, people at the community level, low and moderate income people, environmentalists, on just a variety of issues that were both sort of in your face, issues that were happening that were assaults on people and communities, as well as the natural world. But also part of the work was not just opposing, all these one at a time things that need to be responded and reacted to, but proposing. By that meaning looking at and trying to work for things that are more fundamental in nature, that try to get to sort of the root causes so that we don't forever and ever and ever constantly respond, react, and resist, which to a certain extent we'll always have to do to a certain extent, but it's way too damn much that we're always on playing defense. And so part of what we tried to do in my work was playing offense, trying to put the powers to be on their, so to speak, heels by promoting something, a few things that would be more fundamental in nature that tried to change the rules of the game. And so it's been that kind of work that's more propositional in terms that I ran into people that were focused on issues of corporate rule, big money in elections, how that dominated, that has, plundered people and the planet, and what we can do about it. And so working in the last number of years for the American Friends Service Committee in a group that was going around the country and doing education and advocacy called the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy, POCLAD for short, POCLAD.org is the website. It's no longer around now because many of the people who were frustrated activists at that time, and this goes back about 20 years ago, was frustrated and was looking at ways to be more activist in nature. And that organization really was sort of, you could say, maybe the first to unearth this whole notion that corporate entities should not and were not intended to have the power and the constitutional rights that people today believe is sort of inevitable and can't do anything about, is irreversible, and that's just plain bullshit. It
Okay.
is very different, was not intended. So anyway,
Before
that's
I
how I got
sail into the, I
started.
do want to learn about more of the activist. I'm just going to ask you a quick question about move to amend, since you did append that to the your introduction. So the thing is that
Sure.
the move to amend thing, right? You guys are actually, a lot of people know about Wolfpack, an organization that is talking about amending the Constitution. But I believe you said move to amend, if you put the timeline at 2000, where you put it at, actually precedes Wolfpack. Am I correct?
Yeah, by a little bit.
Okay.
Wolfpack has been, in some respects, allies in that they are focused on trying to get big money out of elections. They don't quite see eye to eye as Move to Amend does in terms of abolishing all corporate constitutional rights.
Okay.
And so they're more focused on sort of seeing corporate money in elections and trying to get rid of that, not just law, but sort of constitutional edict. But we go because the whole notion of corporate entities amassing constitutional rights, ability to overturn, all of these amendments that give people at the local level and elected officials the right to determine all sorts of things at the local level, would still exist if all that happened was just to get corporate money out of elections. So, quite eye to eye there. But Wolfpack also, they've been sort of out in front in looking at how a constitutional amendment should happen. And there's two ways to do it. One is to try to go through Congress, and the other is just do an end run around Congress and just go directly to the state. So Wolfpack has been since day one advocates of the latter, saying that we should just forget about Congress and try to call for an issue specific called Article 5 convention, and just try to focus on a convention that is very on just this one issues that pertain to money in politics and the like, and just deal with that through state legislatures.
Okay, well, one of the reasons why, I was, there's multiple reasons why I looked into move to amend, but one of the things is that if I look at Wolfpack, right, I think over the last 2 years, they received over $300,000, and I think they have 5 states before, and then now they're down to 4 states. When I look at their amount of their activity, like their tweets, I don't see so much response. I do see that they're tweeting though; they are doing some work.
Mhm.
Um, I know there's a challenging, like, getting people involved during politic years, but considering their length of, being around, their funding, right? I might expect more. But also Move to Men has been around longer. You seem extremely qualified. What do you think is the what will you? It sounds like you're somewhat aware of, I don't know if you know about the 5 states, 4 states with $300,000, but
Yeah.
what is the what would you put move to amends, like, funding and ability to get it done versus Wolfpack?
Yeah. Well, there's some, I would say, external and internal factors
Okay.
for what's going on externally, which we share with Wolfpack and all those other organizations out there that are doing more propositional work, like, hey, amending the Constitution is one damn of a big lift. And it's not right in your face. It's not something that, hits you between the eyes or punches you in the stomach like, hey, I don't have health care, or, I've got student debt that I got to deal with, or my God, the river behind where I live is polluted because of the company that's dumping their crap into it. I mean, that is real stuff that is in real time, that's immediate, that needs to be responded to, that people can get immediately, that has a human face or environmental face, that people rise up and put energy, their time, their talents, and their resources behind. And so when you're working to try to change things fundamentally, like amending the Constitution, they and us share that impediment and that hurdle. It's hard when there's all of this stuff that needs to be responded. There's
Okay.
all of these, not just problems, but crises. But internally, they are. I think one of their main guy, real good guy, Mike Mineta, I think is his name, has left the organization, is now working for American Promise, I believe. Really highly skilled person. I'm not sure who replaced him, but I think their staffing is far less and their capacity is far less. And so, some of that internal stuff, I don't know the specifics to,
Sure.
but it's damn hard. to do this. And so the only way to do it, and what we try to do at Move to Amend, is really, both have a foot in either camp of one saying, yes, we need to focus on the fundamental, and we have a very specific organizing handle on it. It's an actual amendment that's been introduced to Congress. So that's a real world kind of thing. It's something you can put on, the flagpole and raise up, and to educate around, to organize around. It sort of gives us some sort of fundamental legitimacy by saying, look, we're not just talking about what needs to be done in the long term, but here's something very specific that we can get behind. Now,
Sure.
it's hard to pass that in Congress, but nevertheless, it's something tangible. But then the other part of it is you got to link the sort of fundamental issue with what's going on in the present, and try to consciously and intentionally connect sort of the big picture to what people are doing. So, for example, metaphorically, to talk about, it's going to be damn hard to get healthcare for all, past first base, metaphorically, so long as the pharmaceutical corporations or the hospital corporations or, the insurance corporations have the kind of power monetarily and control to buy, rent, lease, or retain public officials. And the same with environmental stuff. It's hard to get very far. And even when you sort of win on a regulatory level, these entities will just come back next year and sort of clean. They'll change something regulatorily and they'll just come back again. So, so we try to consciously make the links and connections with those real present issues with this fundamental thing that is actually on the books, that is in Congress, been introduced, HJR 48.
I did ask also, that was a great answer, by the way. I also did ask about the funding right there. If I take a look at, Wolfpack, I'd say 300,000 over 2 years is about $150,000 a year for the general operating budget. How much what do you say the range of your operating budget is? 100 to 100 million? I don't know. Maybe less?
Yeah, well,
50,000?
yeah, that's
I don't know.
no, we got a budget of, it's about 250,000 or so annually. We've got 5 or 6 staff.
Okay.
The big thing about us, and I know, some of these other groups try to do it, but we have been from day one consciously, it's one of our basic and values that we absolutely positively, based on the work that we're doing, must be both politically and economically independent.
I like
Meaning
that. Yeah.
that we're not connected in any way, shape, or form with, major foundations, the government. We're not a front group to a political party or to any, big organization, to the government, to, a couple of very wealthy super duper donors. The problem is when you put all your financial eggs in one basket like that, guess what? They've got you. They now potentially influence you. But there's also the influence that comes from those one or two. So we have consciously said, we have got to go to the same people that we're trying to work with at the grassroots through our affiliates and advocates for our financial support. And we will swim or drown based on the kind of support we get from those smaller contributions, be they one time or recurring.
Can you give me an example of a time when you guys said no to a donor? Maybe off the top of your head. Look, I know you might not have worked in fundraising directly.
Yeah, well, because we have said that up front.
Right. They know.
Because that's our principle up front. We created a deterrent effect.
Well, I get that. Yeah. Trust me, the corrupt ones, they know they're wasting the time with me. I feel you on that. Yeah. I also saw,
it's
by
really
the way,
important. Really important.
Yeah, I saw your past work with Common Cause. What is the relationship between Common Cause and Move to Amend?
Well, it's been hot and cold. Personally, I was an elected board member on Common Cause. It was one of the last national elections. Now they are chosen by the board and directors, but there at one time was national elections. And my platform was, we want to get corporations out of governing. And I was elected, and I was like one of the real rebels on the board. But anyway, at the national level, it's been kind of frosty, respectful, but they've not, at least up to this point, they've not been supportive of abolishing all corporate constitutional rights, And they're more, getting money out of politics, overturning the Buckley versus Vallejo Supreme Court decision in 1976 that equates money with free speech, which is good as far as it goes. It doesn't go far enough, though, at the national level. But as you may know, Common Cause has a presence at the state level, many states. And we've gotten along pretty well in some states with Common Cause. I live in Ohio, and we get along very well with Common Cause here in the state. In fact, the head of Common Cause in Ohio is on our statewide sort of coordinating committee of Move to Amend Ohio Network. And so we see eye to eye and work collaboratively and in solidarity with one another. It really does at the state level depend.
Sure. I like working with nationals, but a lot of times national like leadership, they have their own ideas and they're not really in touch. So I'm not afraid to just work with, the people on the ground in any organization. A lot of times they feel the same way. The people, right, generally, right, the leadership often tries to break them off the fiefdom. So that's really cool, man. And I respect the fact that you work across organizations and on this topic, that means that you're very committed. So that's
Well,
cool,
the other
man. It
thing
just
about,
shows,
yeah,
yeah, it shows
yeah,
something.
another
Yeah.
yeah, another thing about national organizations are I think it's real important to make a distinction between national organizations that are like headquartered in DC versus those that are outside DC. The ones outside DC, I think tend to, it's sort of a generalization, to be sure, but can be more sort of in touch with the locality that they have, even though they're a
Yeah.
national organization. If they're headquartered in St. Louis, it's just going to be it's going to be hard to avoid St. Louis stuff that's going on and Missouri stuff that's going on. But when you're inside the Beltway, man, you just get sucked up in all that national stuff. And plus, there's all the foundations there, all the politicians. It becomes what some people call the nonprofit industrial complex, with
For real.
organizations that
For
are
real.
just hard to separate themselves and to connect with their own base.
It's a whole
Never
shadow
mind.
government. Straight up.
Yeah,
It's a whole
it's
shadow government. I
and
agree
so
with that
it
100%.
just becomes really hard. Even
Yes.
when you're trying to, I think it becomes really hard. So we don't have, we're all virtual now. We don't
Hey,
have a
I like
central
the things you're
office.
saying. There's a
That's
possibility I work with you guys. The as an activist back in the 90s, 20 years, funny thing we talk about 20, maybe 30 years ago now. Yeah. Little the thing is that when I was working on these topics, right, as an environmental activist, I would see that when we go into the voting chamber, that the politicians who would talk with for days, right, yeah, they went in there and did something completely different. So I did realize the corporate control. I actually tried to write a paper in college where I said that, if you create if you have a mosquito, it just causes a little bite on you, and that's a little damage. But if you create a giant, you cannot create these giants that are capable of huge damage and then destroy all accountability. That's absurd, right? You cannot. They can create more damage. You should have more accountability, not less. So that was you know, uh,
exactly.
they didn't like
And
that,
that's
but I
exactly
totally
what's
agree with that
happening. Yep.
anti-corporate message. Yeah,
Yep. No, exactly. That is what's happening. That damage, it's not just small scale now, but it is, um, it's, the crises that are caused by uh, well-to-do people believing that they can do, influence. They want the individual interest and the collective corporate interest that just sees the bottom line as the bottom. And to hell with people, places, and the is now creating, literally a crisis of not just a governance, but of a livable world. And
yeah,
so we got to get control of these things, as was once the case, actually. And that's part of the whole history that, the sense we tend to get the narrative of the current dominant narrative is that, oh, this stuff is inevitable. It's just part of the arc of history. It's like, I don't know, it's like gravity. You can't really do anything about it. But the whole thing of how corporate entities attain their power, their constitutional rights, is not like gravity. It was intentional, it was deliberate, it was planned. And just as things have been done, guess what? They can be undone. So
yeah.
it's
You're damn right.
important to sort of change your mind and change the narrative that that this is not inevitable. We can do it. And sometimes what has been said that the greatest danger we have is to believe something that is just simply not true. And it's hard to fight an enemy, as someone has said. It's hard to fight an enemy who has outposts in your head. And right, the corporate sort of has implanted in our brain so that we censor ourselves and don't organize ourselves and don't come together ourselves, or that when we do challenge corporate rule, we do it on such a superficial, modest level. Oh, let's just try to have better, I don't know, self-regulations of, companies self-regulate themselves or whatever, instead
Yeah,
of saying, no, you don't have the right to do this. And at one time, and this was the case at one time, that if companies violated the terms of their charter or license to exist, guess what? Their license or charter was revoked and their company was dissolved and
yeah,
their assets were distributed to people who may have been harmed or communities were harmed. We need to do that again if these
absolutely.
entities
Yeah, they need to be
absolutely.
responsible. It's just common sense responsibility. I like that so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can actually provide two solid examples of the phenomenon that you talked about that I've seen in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that if we take you remember that movie Herbie Lovebug back in the day, that little
Wow, that goes back a ways.
yeah, that little car that was driving around the Disney movie.
Sure.
There was
Yeah.
a remake made of it with Lindsay Lohan, by the way, but in the original version, right, the big bad real estate corporate developer, right, wants to force the lady out of her home, right? And that was a storyline back in the day, but in the new version, they erased that storyline. Any anti-commercial
Really?
corporate messaging has been erased from Hollywood. Now people
Mm-hmm.
don't even know that taking on the real estate landlord is a thing. They erasing it. Yeah, that you're right. Actually, they are controlling that, and the corporate media is just their
Yep.
part is in terms of so. Now the
Yep.
thing is that there's a lot. I really respect that so much. Your organizational work right there. A lot of people love the organizations, but I'm more concerned about the people working in them. So I'm going to shift this this interview more towards learning about more about yourself as an activist, which I'm very excited to learn about. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I just want to that really helps me to really understand people's really true passion is what got them started in their activism. Right? What's the first active thing you worked on? What got you turned on to this?
First active thing I worked on was probably when I was in school, in trying to get the college I went to divest their holdings in companies that were involved in South Africa. So this was during the apartheid era, and Coke was a big company. What was that slogan? Coke sweetens apartheid. And so the college I went to was, they had a bunch of money in financial institutions and in commercial companies that were invested in South Africa. And so the college I went to, Oberlin College, known as sort of liberal and
I've heard of
progressive,
that one. Okay.
yeah, in Ohio, one of the first schools permit people of color and women to be students. But on this, they didn't. They thought, oh, their investments were going to be affected adversely, and we wouldn't be able to do all the good things we do. But look, you guys are just hypocrites in saying that you promote and have this historical legacy of justice, particularly toward people of color and women, and here you're investing in companies that are backing an apartheid regime. And so was very involved on campus in putting pressure on the trustee. Year after I left, finally did agree to divest. So that was kind of my first venture into
So
that.
what kind of like opened your eyes to that problem of the apartheid in South Africa or getting more involved in that particular issue?
Yeah, well, I guess it just goes back to even before that. I grew up in a house. So I'm a person who was born with a physical disability
Okay.
of requiring a number of surgeries as a child. I have scoliosis, and so was in a school with a lot of other young people who were physically disabled, and had, in some cases, either mentally challenged and the like. And to a certain extent, we were among the first of my age, the first group to sort of be what was called mainstream, brought out of the closet. And there was still a lot of discrimination toward how we were treated as second class citizens because you looked differently or you spoke differently and have
But
the same quote unquote mental capacity. So that sort of, reality in my case. I mean, in some cases, no question, being a white male is privileged, but being, physically disabled was not being privileged. And so I learned, quite a bit from that experience. And then I grew up. I, was raised in Akron, Ohio, which at one time was the headquarters of the four largest rubber companies, tire companies in the world.
Sure.
And so my dad was a labor. He was involved in one of those and was a labor organizer
Cool.
and with the United Rubber Workers early on. And so, growing up in that household, learning about labor and workers and management and how the police would, when there was a strike and they would show up, guess what side they would align themselves with? It wasn't the workers' side. It was the management side. So, hearing those firsthand stories and all of that sort of affected my outlook. And so hearing then sort of the hypocrisy of my college, then saying, oh, here's what we're trying to do, here's the verbiage, here's the rhetoric, and here's the reality. It's like, sorry, that doesn't square. And you need to back up what you do with what you say. Now is literally sweetening apartheid.
Those words make a lot of sense to me, and I really appreciate that. I think it's so far really enjoying this interview. It's great, yeah. Now the thing is that now I'm going to move on to the thing is that some people have certain ideology that shapes their activism, right? Some people say they're socialist, communist. I'm not really any of those, really, to tell you the truth, anymore. But what about you? Do you have a certain ideology that kind of shapes your? It sounds like anti-corporate is the main thing, but I wouldn't really say
Well,
that. Yeah,
it's focusing on, I think, the dignity and worth of every single person, no matter who they are or their background, as well as respecting all life forms and to understand that we as human beings are not equal to, let alone superior to, the natural world. The natural world will exist fine without human beings,
I
but
like that a
human
lot.
beings will not exist fine. In fact, won't exist at all without the natural world. So it's a combination of those two things. All the isms and I just never really got into. I don't know.
That's
Never.
cool. Yeah,
None of my friends and all are into the socialism and anarchism and all. And there's, with like anything, there's certain, I think, tenets that
yeah,
make a lot of sense. But I just
sure.
refuse to kind of follow a single sort of ideology other
I like that.
respecting the
I like that.
dignity and worth
I see the
of the person
ideologies
and
like
the
yeah.
planet.
I
Yeah.
see the ideologies like martial arts. So you're kind of
Mm.
like a mixed martial artist, right? Like some people want to say that Taekwondo is like, all you need and the best thing in the world. Some people say it's Brazilian
Mhm,
Jiu-Jitsu.
mhm,
And I,
mhm,
right after my time of experience, I started to say, you know what? I'm gonna use a variety of techniques. You know what I mean? So I like that, yeah. And I like the holding up to dignity.
mhm,
That's so true, man. Now the thing is that you may have right in your years of being an activist look to others to kind of like
mhm,
how they handled certain situations, and they may have shaped your activist style or understanding, right? You're also American. You probably got exposed to American activists versus other countries. So
mhm. Yeah.
is there anybody who's been influential to your activist style or understanding?
Well, quite a number. I spent a sabbatical, about 7 weeks in India, studying Gandhian nonviolence and the activism there back in the early 90s, trying to sort of discern how social change and social movements operated within that context in that period. That, some things were unique to that era, others were not. Also, spent some time sort of studying Alinsky style organizing in the US, in Chicago and elsewhere. I don't know if listeners have heard of the Highlander Arts and Education Center in Tennessee, started by a guy named Miles Horton, that helped to do organizing and education and really break the racism of the Deep South and helped bring down Jim Crow ism, and so studied that. And then there was a guy doing something called listening projects in North Carolina that would bring together people from different sides of an issue and develop a question and interview people one on one and then small groups to try to find common ground. So those were things that I studied and tried to apply, to stuff I was doing. And I've had a lot of, fortunately, I've been very, very fortunate in having a lot of people I've taken things from, and both, successes and failures, because we all make damn mistakes and we can learn from them. So, I was very involved doing local currency work in Ohio, people doing local money, sort of doing economic self-determination. And the guy who started the hours system in Ithaca, New York, studied from that guy and learned a lot from some of the Alinsky people in Chicago, some women there and others who were focusing on, how to make local issues national issues and trying to connect the two and bring people together. So I think it's important. And then,
Is the
younger
hour
people
system like
today,
a labor bank where people like trade their services
Mhm.
for hours or something like that?
Basically, it's a system that combines local currency
Okay,
that is developed in the community with with uh, with time. So that system, which now has been digitized, but then it was just paper, was the creation of local money. Each hour was established at that time. The average living or hourly wage was $10 an hour. So they would create an hour note, a half-hour note, a quarter-hour note. And so if you did something for me for say 3 hours, I could pay you. I would have to pay you in 3 hours. That could be a combination of local currency, one summit hour note, $10 of a Federal Reserve note, and 1 hour of, I don't know, cutting your grass, let's say. So what it was meant to do was or supplement the currency, the regular currency system that at the time we were doing it was of the Clinton era recession that was going on, where people had time necessarily, but they didn't have work and they didn't have dollars. So a way to stretch would be, you can't pay your electric bill with
sure.
local currency, but if you can have your lawn mowed with local currency,
Yeah.
then you can save your dollars for paying your electric bill.
I've also
It's a
involved in
way,
an alternate trade
yeah,
type of
yep.
communities. So that's cool as hell, man. I really appreciate that. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff like that going on now,
Right.
and there's buying clubs going on, and so much mutual aid that's taking place today. That is a piece of the solution, because I'm convinced that a piece of the solution going forward and bringing about real fundamental change, piece of it has to be local creating alternatives, and a piece of it has to be trying to change the macro system.
Right.
And the piece of it has to be creating your own alternative structures and institutions. So those
Okay.
to me are sort of the three pieces that need to happen to really bring about sort of not just reformation, but transformation.
Okay. So now we're going to move on more towards like the activism segment of the, before we're finding more about you yourself, right, as an activist. Now we're going to move on to the activism portion. This is actually going to be part of my online activist series, where I've actually interviewed over 80 activists so far from all different aspects. You get to see all their answers, right? What shaped them as an activist. And this question I think is quite interesting. What do you think are the most effective things that activists can do?
Um, Most effective. Well, how many hours do you have? um, well, I think one, right from the start, what's extremely important is finding a balance between action and reflection. There's a lot of people out there that are just doing stuff, and they do stuff like one at a time. Let's do a rally. Then that's followed up with let's do a vigil. That's followed up with, I don't know, let's do a letter writing campaign. But there's not really, sometimes, if not sadly, oftentimes, a time to between an event and planning the next event to sort of stop and reflect on, hey, what went right, what went wrong, what can we do next that actually builds on this. So I think thinking and doing strategically is extremely important. And to do anything strategically requires what, if you're an activist, you just, don't have much of, and that's time, right? We're just out there constantly sort of responding and reacting, which again, part of that is understandable, part of that is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. When a building is burning down, my God, you got to go in and save people from the burning building. But if there's burning building after burning building after burning building, and all your time is doing that, and you never, ever, ever take a step back and say, who the hell are setting these buildings on fire? And what are we going to do to try to alleviate that? And that requires some strategic thinking, some analysis, some naming the moment, some surveying of people who are on the ground, who are involved in other stuff, to just get a sense of what's going on. Hey, what and who we're up against, they do strategic planning all the time. That's what they are about. And here we are out here not doing that. We are playing right into their agenda by just trying, they create the agenda, they throw shit at the wall, and we're out there just trying to scrape off that stuff. And we don't take the time to reflect, to think about and to learn from, again, past history, what our brothers and sisters, both in the past, have done that, again, stuff is not transferable exactly, but there may be some stuff that we can learn from past movements. And in the present time, in other places, in other parts of the world, what are brothers and sisters doing in other places right now that
Yeah.
are, you know, that are combating the pollutants or, the economic inequality or the efforts at fascism. What can we learn from some of those battles? And again, that takes time. And oftentimes we say, oh, well, that's not real stuff. That's not real activism. We got to get out there and just do something without thinking about what is the doing that needs to be done and how is that sort of steps going up. When we do something, it's always adding to what we're doing and not just, sort of a parallel thing, one at a time, one at a time, where at the end of doing 5 things, we have no more power than we had at the end. And that is really the watchword that, again, a lot of activists have problems with, and that is power. We tend to think, and again, we've been acculturated to think if you're a conscientious person, oh, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. To a certain extent, that is true. But one can be conscientious in it and one can empower and bring people together and form legitimate organizations that are trying to build a powerful democracy movement that by definition has to have people who are on the front lines involved in the leadership of that, and that has horizontal leadership, not top-down leadership. So those are the things that we've got to think about, plan for in doing anything. And that's just for openers. What we do then and what the strategy is, it becomes in part what our own internal capacity is. They call it, what is it? SWOT, a SWOT analysis, doing your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT, doing all of that is absolutely essential in developing your plan of action for doing whatever. And there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of good things. A guy named Bill Moyer, not Moyers with an S, that some people may know of, who, has done commentary, good guy and all. But this guy, Bill Moyer, was involved in the clamshell alliance in the 1970s. And so they shut down the nuclear power industry and nuclear power plants. And he developed in a book that he later named Doing Democracy, 8 stages of successful social movements, of what you need to do to go from one step to another. It's a good read. It's really important to know how to go and where to go and where you are at any one time. It's really good. And then another resource I think is really good is a book called This is an Uprising, put together by a couple of brothers, Engler brothers, that just look at, in mostly the US context, but not exclusively, how social, what we can learn from social movements in the past for today. So those would be, I think, beginning points, I think, for in developing strategy and developing a strategy ultimately to build a movement that is in size and in proportion to what we're up against. Because if you're
Yeah.
up against a massive problem, if you've got a boat that's leaking, okay, what's the most effective response to it? What's the most effective tool? Is it a teaspoon? Is it a cup? Or is it a bucket? Between the three, a bucket is more useful and more effective. If it's a rowboat, if it's an ocean liner, forget it. But, we've got to come up with tools that are in scale and in proportion to what it is that we are addressing and need to be responsive to. And so, you don't all of a sudden start with a gigantic social movement, a democracy movement. You build toward it, but you got to have a plan to build toward it.
I like that. I'm a tool-based approach person myself. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, the thing is that, this is actually kind of like a training tool, right, for activists who are out there. Um, and a lot of people who are, maybe starting out their activism, they might join an organization, and then they feel like the organization might not be listening to them. They may feel like the organization has different priorities. They may feel unhappy. They may, right, it could go either way, right? They might end up recommitting and then finding that it works out. They might find out that they end up leaving. What are some, you've worked with a bunch of organizations. What do you think some of the best practices are that organizations can take? And how can people, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of uh, astroturfing out there, a lot of people being exploited for their labor and their resources. Um, what do you think are the, how would you address that?
Yeah, there's no one simple. I think there's a lot of individual things that can be done, some tools that internally organizations can create, like creating just a simple form that lists what are the kinds of things you that may be interested in working with us find most interesting, both in terms
Okay.
of their interest, but also in their skill level. So, I mean, that's from the organizational standpoint, but what makes it work is not an organization, right? It's not a mission statement. It's not the master plan. It's the human beings. And we've got to treat one another with, again, going back to the dignity and respect. And when that person fills out that form and submits them, being able then to follow up with that person and say, hey, appreciate you having responded, by email and sending that form. I'd like to talk with you and find out what it is you are
Yeah.
interested in and see if there's some common ground. It's not magic. It's not, it's not organizational development PhD stuff. It's just
Yeah.
basic, I think, human treatment and finding that right match. Now, of course, sometimes what people may really like to do is not necessarily what an organization is into doing at that time. So it may not be a right match. If somebody's like really into, I don't know, doing like a vigil, and that's not real. People are not really into organizations at that time digiling. They're more into civil disobedience or vice versa. That that organization may not be the right match, but that can only be discerned, I think, when you have that conversation and that engagement and finding out, humanly, uh, who they are, what their background is, what their interest is, what's their motivation for doing this, to what extent is it personal, because I mean, there's been a lot of people that I've run into over there. I've been doing this stuff for 40 years, and people who come sometimes into front door, when I would work for this Quaker organization, American Friends Service Committee, and wanted to volunteer, were like doing it just for their own personal reasons and did not have sort of any sort of larger sense. And they would come in, sort of do whatever it was, and then that was it. Or so many people would come in and short amount of time would just burn out and just it doesn't do them any favors, it doesn't do us any favors. So finding out what motivates them and helping them find the right sort of pace is important as well. So again, there's very, very few shortcuts.
I agree. I like that answer. Now, the fact of the matter is that over the years you have quite a extensive activist background. I think over 20 years in the organization and probably maybe much longer, right? Maybe 30, 40 years an activist.
Yeah, 30 years for this American Friends Service Committee in Ohio, and then
Okay.
over 30 years, and then the last 6 years for Move to Amend.
So the thing is that when you first started as an activist, right, till now, you've definitely developed a lot, right? Maybe that's too long of an era, right? Maybe something more recent will come to mind, but have you had any perspective changes or significant perspective changes from the beginning till now, or maybe something more recent, right? Maybe something changed because you came to a realization.
Mm.
If you could share that, right? Because there's a lot of people I think who are going to be watching this channel who are kind of
Mhm.
like just beginning to learn as activists, or they may be in the mid range, right? Maybe 5 years in, 10 years in, right? And they'll be, if you could look back and tell yourself 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
What, go ahead.
yeah. No, that's a real good question. And I would say in my personal, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot if I really reflected on it, but the one that kind of for me personally sticks out is in first starting, working a lot on I first started with the this American Friends Service Committee, worked a lot on sort of anti-war issues and peace issues and budget priorities from the federal level and at the local level. And so worked on sort of like, foreign policy justice and economic justice issues of budget priorities and political justice of having a role. But I really didn't place much emphasis, as I should have, on issues of what I would call social justice, issues in particular around race and gender, that for me now is a lot more not just significant but inextricably connected, that we as organizations have to lift up and not just tokenize but genuinely focus on issues of diversity and inclusion, because truth of the matter, I mean, for a lot of reasons, again going back to dignity and respect, but also who are the categorically groups of people who are being most messed up And
Okay.
most,
If I could
in,
just push back
yeah,
just for a second,
sure.
right? The
Yeah.
thing is that when you first started, you said that you had worked on apartheid in South Africa. So it sounds like the race issue was kind of there from the beginning. So
It
did you pull
was.
away from it a little bit and come back, or what
No,
happened?
I worked on it in that way because that was the issue. It's like
Okay.
it was the issue of race and economic injustice was tied together.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like that was something you saw in the beginning. So then it
yeah,
sounds like for some reason, right, you want to come back or do that more, but you were already doing that in the beginning. So
yeah,
what
but
do you mean? Go ahead.
I get, yeah, I guess is in working on like budget priorities, it was like, okay, the main issue there of sort of cutting it and framing that issue was more about economic injustice and
Oh,
not
I
about
get it now.
racial
I get it.
injustice. And
I
so
see.
it's like I didn't say it's both. They're interconnected.
I
And
see.
yeah, it is economic injustice, but disproportionately, who's being impacted most by these budget priorities? Well, it's people of color.
So
So
if I
I
understand now,
I
right? Yeah.
didn't emphasize that as much as I should have.
So I think I get it. So you're saying like, when we're doing the budget stuff, you got locked into like economic way of thought and you weren't like keeping this, right, your original base, right, of ideas really merged together. And now
Not as integrated as I should have. Yeah.
hey, that makes sense. Okay, that's cool. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
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 So this is gonna be kind of a weird question, but really just take it from any perspective you want, right? What is your idea of the current state of things? Well, right, we look at the world today. What do you think is going on?
Well, I like to think that I'm sort of again sort of two-headed or a a person that sees both the optimism and pessimism in what's happening today. That we are in a state of multiple crises that are so interconnected that it's hard to separate them. Political, ecological, social, economic, and ethical and moral, all of those. And it's hard to know which one is going to sort of trigger some of the others. I mean, even right now, this weather we're having is climate related, climate destruction related, but it's having enormous negative economic effects that is only exacerbating the issues of debt. That at some point we're going to have to figure out how to deal with, and the politics of that is going to be incredibly nasty with privatization or corporatization of public assets to try to pay for that debt. That's going to create even greater political instability and decline of trust in governing and in government. That will create, chaos, social chaos, that will make people blame the other, whether it's immigrants, people of color, people who are quote unquote the bottom of society. So you see there's sort of the circle. All of this is sort of intertwined. We're facing multiple crises, and some of these we can deal with, sort of, but the existential crisis of the environment is, I think, so significant, and you can't bullshit your way out of that. People can try to,
Yeah.
paper over and gloss over and kick the can down the road, pick your metaphor on some of these other things. Keep going into debt, keep printing money, that kind of stuff, or keep sort of pushing this thing out of the way. But, Mother Nature always bats last. And she, ain't buying the BS that's happening. And so how we deal with that and all of these things together is the question, unlike anything that we as a species
I
have faced
appreciate that. That's a real cool message. I appreciate that.
have faced with. And so, in part, we're in uncharted waters, which is both a hell of a challenge, but an amazing opportunity.
Okay.
And the opportunity there is, I think, we've gone through, some people say, uh, 3 or 4 great turnings. This is what some people use the term, or, epochs, where we have fundamental, sort of transformation from just hunters and gatherers to sort of agricultural civilization, quote unquote civilization, and then agriculture to industrial and those kinds of things. But we are now going to have to be moving toward a society and a civilization, whether it's west east across the board, that is focused less on material well-being, i.e., growth, because you just can't have growth, unending growth on a finite planet. Sorry, folks, but try to do the math on that one. Try to do the physics on that one. It doesn't work. You
I
can't square
understand.
that circle. And
Uh,
so figuring out that, I think, is resulting in a transfer. You're already seeing some of it where people are sort of saying, wait a second, it's not growth, it's development. It's figuring out how we can. There's a guy, economist many years ago named Herman Daly, that developed an economic alternative system called steady state economics. Way ahead of his time then, is sort of normative now,
are you
in
into
which
permaculture? Just a quick question.
I think it's separate from, but certainly in the same spirit of
Okay.
trying to understand the realities, the givens of the natural world, and developing an economy within it that it respects it and that works within it. Steady state economics. Herman Daly is the guy's name.
That's
And
cool.
um, and so understanding that and realizing, some things are, unending. Love and community and solidarity and working together, that's limitless. It's
Yeah.
not like, having, 16 lawnmowers in our garage or whatever the case may be. Forget it. Uh,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
not going
honestly,
to
the
work.
consumerism is really killing
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
consumer
Yeah.
is killing us and all
So,
that. So I
yeah.
think understanding and that transformation, I think, is going to take the opportunities to come together to work. I mean, either we do that or we're doomed. I mean, it's one way. Either we sort of develop through being forced upon us, but also through intentionality of understanding the solidarity of needing to work together of the community. I mean, that's how we've gotten from there to here. Is mostly our species is as more often than not acted together because we can't, we aren't faster than the leopard and the lion and all. Well, we've managed to survive because of our smarts and our ability to come together. And so we're going to have to do that. And I think there's a lot of understanding and appreciation, and just simply thinking we can develop that we can get ourselves out of this through some technological innovation. Sorry, it ain't going to work.
I appreciate that. Yeah, just to share with my audience right quick, I'm a lot older than I look. I'm actually 40 in my 40s. So the thing, mid 40s. So the thing is that I've been an activist for 25 years. Now, I'm gonna be biased because this guy has a lot of answers that I like personally, straight up. I'm a huge fan of. But I want to tell you something right quick. I told you earlier about my 80 interviews that I have. I have something called the Actus of the Year Award that I give every. We already awarded the one for 2021. That was actually Brian Winters from the American Union. But with your things that you've accomplished so far and your perspective, I'm a big fan. I think you got a really good shot at getting Act of the Year for 2023. But we'll see, right? Nothing's perfect. But this guy is very special in terms of his qualifications. Also, for my audience, I hope you do watch some of the online activist interview series and see there's some activists that have a longer time in the game, and some of them have a shorter time in the game. And I think there is a unifying thread of particular perspective that is shared amongst people that are more experienced, and this guy does seem to line up with my own experiences and many other experienced activists. And I hope that you guys really, it's a great study to series. It's a series to study, right? What do they think are the most effective things? You're going to hear from many different points of view, different levels of experience, and it's interesting to see how that changes. So I'm a huge fan. So why don't you share with my audience, right, your social media or different ways. And a lot of people, I respect your tie to the organization, but a lot of people outlive the organizations, right? I've, you know, Rainbow Coalition from Jesse Jackson, that was a big thing back in the day. Gone, right? NIPERG, how effective are they now versus back then? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of coming and going, but the people stay the same. I really like his answer about focusing on the people. So don't be afraid to, I know you're going to share the Move to Amend stuff, but also share your own stuff.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. Well, to get more information for Move to Men, just go to movetoamend.org/motion, MOTION, motion. And that is the address to sign the motion to say that you support our effort, and you'll get information about what's going on and how to get involved if you're at all interested in this. We do have local affiliate groups and advocates all over the country, and if you're interested in
I
finding
might be
out
one of
more,
them real soon.
yeah, how to widen and deepen, because it's got to be both about widening and deepening the involvement, the engagement, because the only way to bring about this change, as history shows, is to build from the bottom up, not from the top down. You got to have friends who are in positions of power and allies inside, but most of it, I mean, let's be real, has always been from the outside. It brings pressure to bear on the system, both in this country and abroad. So, that's sort of the main link for Move to Mend. I put together every week a couple of historical calendars that try to tell the history of different issues. One of them, sort of related to that, is called the Real Democracy History Calendar. So if you just put in, Google Real Democracy History Calendar, you'll go to the website that has it, and there's a place where you can subscribe to it, and it's free. And so every Monday morning you get that in your mailbox for that week of what historically in this country and abroad is from a standpoint of creating democracy, self-governance, self-determination. So it's something I try to help people get on the other side of the learning curve. My email address, just personal, is gcoleridge, that's Coleridge, the number 1, gcoleridge1 at gmail.com if you want to cuss or discuss, anything I've spoken about or that you'd like to learn more about. And, the other sort of passion I'm involved in, I'm on the board for a national group called the Alliance for Just Money. It's an organization that's focusing on trying to democratize money and money creation. One of the other things that has been sort of buried and obliterated from our consciousness as individuals, as well as activists, not just sort of how corporate entities at one time were under democratic control, but how at one time money is something that should be a public function, but has been privatized or corporatized, in which money is created literally out of thin air as debt. And when you have debt money, guess what you have? Debt. And every time you sort of pay back that debt, you got to pay off the interest, of which there is none. So the only way to pay off that interest is to create more money, which means you got to have more debt. It's sort of like believing that you can kind of, I don't know, drink yourself sober. It doesn't work. And sort of that. And so the Alliance for Just Money is an organization that's working at trying to help people understand how we can get out of this fix of democratizing money and getting rid, because the ultimate control mechanism today, 100 years ago in this country was slavery, right? For people of color. Today, we have economic slavery, and that's called being in debt, in which it's even better for the powers to be, because back then the slave owners had to sort of pay for room and board of their slaves. Today, hey, they don't pay for it, we pay for it. In fact, when we pay rent, who owns the apartments anymore? It's the Blackstones and the big companies that are now having us. So we're like paying debt, and we're paying rent then to some of the same people we're paying debt to. So it is just a beautiful system from the system of the powers to be. So anyway, Alliance for Just Money is another thing to look at and pay some attention to and become more knowledgeable of it. Again, getting on the other side of the learning curve.
Okay.
The only other thing I'll just say is that, a metaphor that has been used that I think says a lot about sort of where we're at is that fish discover water last. Now, what does that mean? Fish discover water last. When you're a fish, you don't notice the water around you, right? Because you're in it all around you. Well, there's so many things that are part of the culture around us that we don't notice because it's been around us, unless you take the equivalent of the red pill, right, under like the Matrix. But it's just so, and we're told it's all given, it's all natural, it's sort of how it is. And so part of what I try to do, and part of what many people try to do, is sort of help us realize that what the water is around us and how polluted it is and how dangerous to our existence it is. And that's, I think, real important. So always sort of questioning and challenging what you hear and coming up with yourself, coming up with the answers. And again, part of that, I'll just end here, part of that is taking the time to sort of reflect and make sense and listen to that own inner voice within you to find out what makes sense and what you need to do to be a greater self-actualizing person is so essential. We all need to do that, regardless of what other outside groups we're in. And our identity needs to be defined not just by externally what we're involved in, but also solely by us.
So yeah, that's dope, man. And really like the just quick question. The thing is that you also talked about the calendar earlier, things like that. And that's cool where they can follow you and get like ongoing updates about your work and things like that. Do you have any social media where you might like, be, constantly updating like, I'm working on this or this is my latest, right? You have that money project, which is cool. Maybe something will come up later, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm
in the
on
next.
Twitter.
Okay,
Just
cool.
just just tweet
G
Greg
Coleridge
Coleridge.
one, Greg Coleman.
Yeah, whatever. God, I don't even know my Twitter.
Well, if you don't really
Uh,
update it, then I mean, we share
but I
many
do
links.
update it
I'll
all.
show you.
Yeah, I do all. But
Oh,
I just
okay. So
I
share it.
don't
Yeah.
even know it.
I'll put
Yeah.
it I'll put it in the links below. Yeah, but
Okay. Great.
I'm definitely interested in your ongoing work, and let's talk about that for a second. Now that people have your information, I know that you already gave them one project they can tune
Mm.
into, which is cool as hell. That calendar, I'm gonna be subscribing to that. I guarantee that. But what are your plans for the future? You talked earlier about strategizing and all this other thing, right? What do they have to look forward to? They're gonna send you an email. They're gonna start following the calendar. Move to amend, right? What do they have to look forward to?
Yeah. Well, a couple of first Twitter is at Greg Coleridge. So Greg Coleridge, Coleridg, Greg Coleridge, and I'm on Facebook as well. Um, well, coming up next year, we are reintroducing our We the People Amendment to Congress. This past session, we had the most co-sponsors we've ever had, 95. We're going to be doing work in doing virtual educational events where we try to help people get on the other side of the learning curve about money, politics, corporate rule, social movements, how to do trainings on a variety of things. So again, if you go to movemen.org/motion, you'll find and sign up there. You'll get some of those notices of those events coming up virtual. We're hoping to do, we used to go around the country and do live, what we call barnstorm tours. We may start those. We shut those down during the whole pandemic over the last couple of years. So we'll be doing some of that.
So
We'll
far,
also
what you're saying,
start,
I plan on getting involved with that if I can.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
strong force out here, and what you said
well,
sounds cool as hell, man. I'm really if you barnstorm, I'm down to storm a barn. What up? Go ahead.
yeah. And well, I mean, we've got a couple of people in New York, area who are
Cool. Oh
involved
my
doing
good.
it
Let's.
individually. So would love to connect you and any other listeners, whether it's New York area or any other area. We'd love to connect you with people in your area, or if not, we'd work with you to find other people to
I like to
connect with.
propose a trade right now. Like I said
Sure.
before, I have
All right.
over 80 activists that I've interviewed, and I've contacted many more. They're all.
Mhm.
I put them all on my mailing list. I also have the most candidate interviews out of any YouTuber or any news agency, I believe, from candidates in the 22 election cycle. So the thing is that I had them all on my mailing list as well. Some of them, a lot of them, unsubscribed after the election, right? Because they're not really that committed to change. But a lot of them are still subscribed. I will send the information for your organization. I'm asking for a trade. You don't have to do this. I will already send the information about your organizations to all my to my newsletter. If you could maybe find a way to send my information, maybe it could even be this interview, right? Yeah. But I would appreciate it. It
Oh,
would
I would
help us
definitely do
to
that. Yeah.
interchange
No,
and expand.
there is
Either
no
way.
question.
Cool. Appreciate that.
This
You're the
interview,
best, man. Yeah.
we would, yeah, we would post it and put your personal, whatever, however
Just
you
the link to
want.
the my site. Yeah, dgl7.com. I mean, you could watch the interview here. Here's the link, and that's all I'm
Sure.
asking for. Yeah, that would be too
Yeah.
cool.
Well,
I can't ask for
yeah,
more.
it'd be
Yeah,
great. No, I'd be happy. We'd be happy to do
that's
that.
awesome. Yeah, I'm really
I'm
excited.
happy
So,
to.
just so you know, all the questions I asked you are pretty much in the same sequence and the order that I ask all the other activists. Now
Mhm.
I'm going to ask a couple, just little kind of like appending end questions about some of the other work that's going on.
Okay.
So if I look at Move to Amend, I know for a long time the director was someone named Catherine Scaposi Belknap. Did you ever get
Caitlin
to?
Spokey Belknap.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Did your work ever overlap with hers? Did you do?
Oh yeah. No, no, no.
Okay.
We all work together on issues, and she was the executive director for a number of years until last year. She was kind of, need for health reasons and others to kind of
Yeah,
move
I
on.
read
But
her thing.
yep.
She said that she was depressed about
Yeah.
the state of the movement, and she felt like there wasn't really anything moving forward. Um, and I get it. It's a tough job. I mean, we are
Tough
really
job. I mean, it just,
we're
you burn
outclassed,
it.
we're outpaced,
Yeah.
we're
Yep.
outfunded, everything. Yeah.
You're out everything, and just to be around is and not be burned off or swan dive off a high level bridge is pretty remarkable when you
Now
do
she
this
was the
stuff.
director for quite some time of this
She
organization, right?
was. That's right.
So, like, what has been the? Is she coming back at some point? What do you think?
She's moved on. She's more into well, I'm not totally sure. I know she wanted to
It didn't
focus
seem like
more
she
on.
had any like beef with the organization, or it just
Oh
seemed
no,
like
not
she
at
needed
all.
some time off.
She needed time off. She wants to focus more on sort of personal, I
Yeah,
think, spiritual issues and
but
get
she might be
involved in some
back. I mean, it sounds
other
like this is
ways.
close to her heart.
It is in one way. I mean, she still is a supporter and the like. We now, been replaced legal director with we're all now co-directors, five or six of us. So we have more of a horizontal relationship and leadership style than we did with Caitlin.
Okay, one of the things also that when because I contacted Wolfpack, I contacted them back in the day because I heard about them through Cenk Unger, right? Move to
Oh,
Amend
yeah,
was I heard
sure.
about it, but I didn't write. I ended up going for the package deal.
uh,
Whatever. Hey, look, they still did some solid work, right? But I appreciate some of the things they do. But I'm really excited about this Move to Men thing. I wish that I had jumped on this earlier. You guys sound just really awesome. Um, but the thing is that I do want to ask, what was the question again? Shit. Um,
uh,
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, about Schenk and Wolfpack, and I'm trying to help you remember what your
Yeah,
question
yeah,
may have
yeah.
been.
Okay, so the thing is,
And the thing is, I think you were trying
shit.
to ask something a little bit challenging or unclear, or between Wolfpack and Move to Amend. I don't know.
Well, okay, so the thing, yeah, this is the question. The thing is that when I look
Okay.
at Wolfpack, right, their website looks okay. What I mean? It looks kind of
Mm,
like a little hipsterish. I'm not mad at that, right? It has that certain
mm,
quality to it. I'm just gonna say what it is. When
yeah.
I look at what's the name of the organization you used to work for? Not the Move to Amend, but one that's similar. Common Cause.
Oh,
When I look
when I
at
was on the
the
board,
yeah,
Common Cause.
when I look at the website, right, the pictures look very kind of like corporate. They're all like
Yeah.
young, like kind of like corporate like looking dudes. When I look at the Move to Amend, it looks very kind of grassrootsy, kind of like ex-hippie. I mean, my kind of people. Just be honest with you, right? Yeah, it's just everybody has their own particular, I guess, community that they feel more. And the hippie communities, right? I came up in Buffalo in the '70s, so
Mm-hmm.
90s, right? Yeah, like that's really who was around me. So, I love that community. Why do you think there is that kind of like different presentational shift, right? Why is Move to Men so like grassroots looking versus Common Cause, which looks so kind of corporate?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, I just think it starts with the vision and the values and what it is that, we're trying to do. And, I can't fully speak to what Common Cause is trying to do now, but our sort of principles and values are a commitment to grassroots organizing and coalition and movement building and solidarity organizing and anti-oppression and being independent politically and economically. So when you start from that frame, you're by definition sort of starting from the bottom and looking up and what needs to be done to build power. And the power that comes that is built from that way is not to sort of align yourself with the already existing power structure or powerful people. It's trying to build it. And the only way you're going to do that effectively is God, you got to have the numbers, and you got to have the vision, and you got to have the solidarity, and you got to have the commitment to working in solidarity with one another. So I think when you start from that place, then everything is a reflection of that. What
Appreciate
you
that. Yeah.
say and how things look, including things like websites.
Looks aren't everything, but sometimes, it can be predictive. So we'll see, right? Yeah. Not always, but Move to Amend, I do like that grassrootsy feeling. But we'll have to see if that is truly reflected in the end. But we'll see, yeah. But it's just something that I noticed, and it kind of stands out out of all the NFPs that are out there, especially those Washington ones. They all look so corporate-y, don't they? Hey, maybe it's just me. Look it up for yourself. We'll see. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What you were talking about earlier
Well,
about, yeah, the different culture and the mindset, being from, say,
yeah,
Minneapolis, being inside versus being inside the DC
yeah,
Beltway with all that big money and ambassadors and big money floating around, and everybody's looking all like that all the time. It becomes a norm
yeah.
for them, and they,
Yeah. Well, again, if you start from accepting the dominant culture and everything within the dominant culture, then something that looks corporate looks legitimate,
yeah.
looks credible,
And that becomes
look.
their standard, their normalization. And if you don't look
Mhm,
like that, you're
mhm.
you're abnormal. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't look credible. It doesn't look legitimate. It doesn't look real, and it doesn't look effective because look, the reality is, and we've been told this by a lot of these groups is that, hey, we're philosophically for you. It's just we don't think what you're trying to do is realistic of trying to amend the Constitution. We got to take what we can get, which are crumbs. And you know what? To one extent, on one level, they're absolutely right. Given the current political realities, that's all that is available, crumbs. But what we're trying to do is say, wait a second, you're operating within a certain box of what is considered to be doable. And what corporate constitutional rights and money in politics has done is, we've had hey, look, we the people have never been all the people from day one, right? Never. But what's happened over time is that sort of that democratic quote unquote democratic self-governance box, because of these constitutional amendments and hijacking, have become smaller and smaller in every direction. And where all you can do to be effective under the current system is to operate within this smaller box. Look, we're not into accepting the smaller box. We got to blow out the walls, the ceiling, and the floor.
Yeah. You said that earlier. I think that you guys had like 96 or something like that, like legislators who had signed on board. That's quite a good number right there. Are they also bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans, or no? It's all Democrats or all Republicans?
Well, it's all sort of I mean, there's no Republicans, and there's hardly any corporate Democrats. Hey, I mean, let's be real. A lot of the Democrats in power, you can divide the Democrat. I mean, half the Democrats 20 years ago would have been Republicans.
Yeah.
Given
some of them really are. They're like past Republicans who literally, like, this is not even kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that is the reality. And so part of what we got to do in trying to build this movement is, we got to build power to make people yes when they would otherwise. And if they're not willing to see the light, we got to make sure they feel the heat. And that's part of how you build a movement. And if we're going to get this thing through Congress, at some point, we got to make life really tough for these people to make them do.
Yeah. One program that we're working on locally, we have this thing called Rep My Block, where we actually got all the voter data, right? Because in our state, I believe it's free. In many states, it's free. Sometimes they charge a nominal amount of money to get access to the voter list. Then what happened is that we made this free to the public, right? Because the thing is that a lot of corporate campaign consultants hoard this information. We make it free to the public so people can run for office very easily. Also, it's a great tool for activists because you can go directly to the people who vote and not waste your time at the rally. I go to the rally to find people that are committed, but I don't go there because I think it's necessarily effective, right? Like earlier, like you said, rally, then a vigil, and then where's the progress? You got to follow up to the legislator, make sure, right, that the rally is just to show that there's support for this idea. Then you got to back it up. So, as in terms of like, we have a plan to really try to affect change on our end, right? So we're trying to take over the state assembly, to try to take over the, the leadership, the party boss who assigns the judges and shuffles in 1/3 of elected candidates here in New York.
Nice.
I'd love to put that at your guys' disposal, right? This is actually an open source tool. I'm also a free open source data activist. But and the 96 is an impressive number. You guys make regular calls to your state legislators and your federal officers, or what?
Yeah, every week we have something called We the People Wednesday. On Wednesday, we send something out to, we got 490,000 people on our list around the country. And so, we let them know about what's going on and encourage their reps, but also, not just the federal level, but at the state level as well. And at the local level, we've amassed, and organizationally, we've amassed over 1,400 either organizations, and those organizations are from local to national, municipalities, city councils, village councils, town councils, and voter passed ballot initiatives. So when you add up all those together, organizations, municipalities, and voter passed ballot initiatives, over 1,400 of them have endorsed what it is we're doing or calling for our amendments. And, the reality is that a lot of the federal people, your Congress people, your senators today, metaphorically, yesterday were your governors and state legislators, and the day before that, they were your city council people, your county council people. So getting at those people today, people today and developing those relationships at the local level, getting your city council person, introduce a resolution, call for abolishing corporate constitutional rights in money elections. I mean, you're both getting that passed. So you're getting some educational value. You're helping develop some leadership when people are out there hustling for signatures that are going to be presented to city council prior to the vote. But you're also developing that relationship with that city council person
That's what we're
to
doing,
where
100%.
as they move up or down, depending on how you want to look at it, from local to state to federal, you're developing that relationship so that you have an ally. And again, social change historically is all right, you got to push like hell from the outside, but you do have to have some friends and supporters on the inside that have one another's back. You just can't rely totally on the inside because they're going to compromise. They got to be held accountable by a movement on the outside. But you got to have some people on the inside that are pushing. And so if you have those relationships, great. And that's
You're one of the most exciting activists that I've had on for a while. And I no doubt or hate to any, love to all the other activists I'm working with. But I'm very excited about this interview, and you did a great job, man. I'm a huge fan. I can't wait to do more work together. Yeah. Any last things you want to say before I'm pretty much yeah?
No, just appreciate your work, and everybody listening. Hey, spread the news about this series that DJL7 put together, and by spreading the news, that means go to your social media. Hey, I just listened to, if this thing is live, I just listened to this thing this morning or yesterday, and here's the link to all the other things that are there. Look, we don't have, right? We don't have our own communications department. We got to hustle ours. We have to shamelessly self-promote ourselves, but we got to rely on the move. We got to rely on people at the grassroots to help us. So everybody out there, spread the word about all of this stuff. I spread the word because that's the only way it's going to grow, widen, and deepen. And like it on, go to your Facebook page, go to your Twitter and like it and share it and repost it and retweet it. That's how stuff spreads. That's how it goes viral. It's got to,
baby. That's how it's got to be.
Gotta be.
Can't be buying that algorithm with that fake stuff. Hey, man. All right. So that's